Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the unique privilege of introducing one of America's most admired and respected men. Former U.S. Senator and 2012 presidential candidate Rick Santorum is CEO of Echo Light Studios, America's fastest growing faith and family film company. Santorum is chairman of Patriot Voices, a grassroots and online community of Americans committed to promoting faith, family, and freedom and opportunity. A native of Pennsylvania, Santorum became known as the voice for conservatives who didn't feel their voice was being represented. His grassroots approach to campaigning led him to win the Iowa caucus and a total of 11 states and 3 million votes during the 2012 Republican primary process. Prior to that, while serving in Congress, he wrote and championed legislation that outlawed the hideous procedure known as partial birth abortion. Rick and his wife of 23 years, Karen, are the parents of 7 children, and during his run for president, Rick spoke passionately about his belief that strong families help produce a strong economy. Senator Santorum wrote the 2005 New York Times bestseller, It Takes a Family. South Dakota Tonight. Tonight is your opportunity to thank this man for coming to our great state, but it is also your opportunity to thank him for carrying our family value torch in the national public arena when so few others would. Would you please join me in welcoming to this stage Senator Rick Santorum.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I feel like I was sitting there trying to pump myself up because it's sort of hard to follow like the Energizer Bunny up here. I don't know how this guy, I saw him first thing in this morning. He's the same. He hasn't changed at all. I mean, I don't know whether you take IV caffeine or what do you do, but it's what an amazing, well, he's filled with the Spirit is what it is, and what a great gift he is to the state of South Dakota and to this organization. So it's an honor to be here with you, and thank you, Dale, for all the great work that you do. I was sitting there watching the presentations and listening to the speeches of the 4 honorees, and was touched by all of their comments. They all had a wonderful message, and you could see that these are folks who well-deserved awards, but also folks who deeply feel moved to have an impact on our country. And I just want to share with you tonight the reality that our country is in a lot of trouble right now. I hear this from a lot of people. That people are afraid. People are scared, particularly older folks. Hear this all over the country, that they're afraid about America and where it's going and what's going to happen. And they're concerned as to what we can do. There's almost a feeling of hopelessness, helplessness. That's why I think so many people gathered here tonight, because you see with FHA, you see a ray of hope. You see people doing something and fighting back. Tonight I want to pick up on what John and Christy in particular said about what your role is in this. Because I appreciate the introduction tonight about all the things that I'm doing, and thank me for doing all those things. But I need to share with you that this is always an uncomfortable thing for me, because when I got involved in politics, I never expected to be standing at a podium like this, in an organization like this. And that's really not where my head was. I ran for political office because I was frustrated at the congressman I had. I thought he was dishonest. Not dishonest from a standpoint of fraud or anything like that, but just he didn't tell the truth to the voters back home. And I thought if there's anything that an elected representative should be, they should stand up for the record and defend it. And he was coming back and saying things. It just, I was just sort of your average citizen. who said, you know, I'm going to take this guy on. I had no chance of winning, none. I was up against a 14-year incumbent in a 60% Democratic district, and let's just put it this way. When I won on election night, I was outspent 4-1. When I won on election night, the Wall Street Journal called the Republican National Committee because they had seen reports that this 14-year incumbent had lost, but there was no report as to who won. It's true. So they called the Republican National Committee and said, can you give us the name? And I know this for a fact because it was actually in the Wall Street Journal the next day. It was on the front page, a little blurb. They said, we called the Republican National Committee last night to see who defeated the 14-year incumbent, the 18th Congressional District in Pennsylvania, and they didn't know his name. That's how much I was a surprise. They had no idea who I was. I was a complete long shot. And I came into office, and I was a member of the Gang of Seven. I was a rabble-rouser because I had been told by everybody that Pennsylvania, we were losing 2 congressional seats, and mine was going to be one of them. They were going to take my seat out and put me in with, you know, divide my district up into 3 or 4 pieces, and I would be a one-termer, and it would be it. So I figured I had nothing to lose. So I went in there, and I just did what I thought was right, and lo and behold, I got put in with a 28-year Democratic incumbent, and I won again. And again, I was not thinking about really, you know, why am I here? What's my purpose? It was just go do the right thing. Don't think about anything. Just fight hard. Stand up for the people of your district. And I did that. And after 2 years, I decided I was going to run for the United States Senate. And again, I took on another Democratic incumbent, just focused on the issue at the time in my state was health care. It was 1994. And the Clinton health care plan was out there. And so I just went out and focused on the issue of health care. And I worked on that and ended up, again, miraculously winning that election. So here I am at the age of 36 in the United States Senate. With all due respect, I had no real idea of why I was there. I mean, yeah, I knew. I mean, there were issues I was working on. I cared about a lot of things. But as far as what was really motivating me, what was really at my core, I was just sort of the, well, I'll say it, I was the angry young man. I was a guy out there who wasn't happy with the way things were going, and I saw our country moving in a direction I didn't like. I couldn't really put my finger on it. And then something happened to me. I'm walking down the hallway. Well, 2 things happened to me. One was I was walking down the hallway very shortly after my being sworn in, and a senator walked up to me from Oklahoma and put his arm around me and said, hey, Rick, you know, we have a Bible study every Thursday in the United States Senate. Would you think about coming by to the Bible study? I thought, well, I got a 6-year term. I got a little more time. I'm not running every 2 years. I'm not doing things. Okay, I'll go to a Bible study. And then my family moved, and we moved from Pennsylvania to Northern Virginia and into a new church. And the pastor there at this church, for the first time in my life, preached the gospel. Now, I say that because I know there's a lot of pastors out here. But I was at a church the other day in San Diego, and the pastor at that church quoted a survey from Barna. And the survey said, they interviewed evangelical pastors and asked them about all these issues, abortion, marriage, pornography, all these issues, and whether they had a biblical worldview, consistent. And 90% of them had a consistent biblical worldview. Then they asked the question, how often do you preach on any of these issues? And the answer was 10% preach on those issues. Well, I must have been going to churches where only 10%, I was not one of the 10% that preached on those issues. Because it was never preached to me like that. If you have the ability to be at a pulpit on a Sunday, and you aren't letting the Holy Spirit work through you, then sit down and let someone else do it. Because we can't afford it anymore. If you don't have the courage, to preach the truth, then sit down. We can't afford it anymore. Well, someone did, and it lit a fire. I went to a Bible study. A great chaplain of the Senate led it, and that lit a fire. And all of a sudden, something happened in my life where my faith was sort of something I did on Sunday. If you'd asked me to do the checklist on the beliefs, I'd have been there. I'd have been there. I'd have been in that 90% that got all those things right. But faith was sort of over here in my life. It wasn't in the center of my life. It wasn't what I was about. And it all changed. And with it, my career in politics. You see, God isn't going to change you and then not do anything with you. I found out that during this time that God speaks in whispers. And unless you're really close, you're not going to catch what he has for your call in life. And I was very comfortable being far away, because then I could do what I wanted to do, what I thought was right. When I got close, I ended up being pulled into things that I was told by all of my advisors, don't do. You represent a state of Pennsylvania. It's a purple state, trending blue. You're already the most conservative senator ever elected there. Don't go out and take on issues that are going to galvanize people against you. They're going to put you in a category where the press in particular will come after you. You see, it's okay to vote pro-life. It's okay to stand up for traditional values. Just don't talk about it. It's okay. They won't bother any of your congressmen or senators or representatives, all the folks who are out there and vote pro-life. They're not going to bother you unless you talk about it. I'll tell you a story. You may recall a couple years ago I ran for president. And I was warming up to that possibility in early 2011. And I was asked to come up to New York City and meet with a group of millionaires and billionaires who are the folks that fund Republican presidential candidates. And they had asked all the other Republican candidates to come up. They now found out that I was interested in doing that, so they, I think, reluctantly asked me to come up. And I sat down with them at breakfast, and I was the last one they had interviewed. And they asked me a question on abortion. I answered it. Then they asked me a second question on abortion. I answered it. Then they asked me a third question on abortion. And I said, well, before I answer that question, let me ask you this. You've had 7, 8, whatever, 9 other candidates up here. How many times did you ask them about abortion? Did you ask them any of the questions you just asked me? Heads down. Finally, someone said, no. I said, you know, they have the exact same position as I do on this issue. They're all pro-life. So why are you asking me all these questions on abortion, and you didn't ask them? Long pause. Finally, one gentleman said, because we know you mean it. How do they know I mean it? Because I talk about it. Because I actually try to do things to move the needle. Not just the needle legislatively. That's just a piece of it. One of the things I learned a long time ago in Washington is that Washington is not full of leaders. They're very full of a lot of things, but they're full of, you're familiar with some of them here in South Dakota. Washington is full of very smart and attention-getting followers who know how to get to the front of the pack and look like they're leading. But what they're really doing is just following from the front. Who leads America, like it or not, is you. You do. What is the most secure job in Washington, D.C.? A pollster. There are polls taken every single day, several polls taken every single day. Why? Because we want to know what you're doing. And we want to be right out in front of you. So when you say, oh, what's going on in Washington is a mess. Really? All they're doing is trying to stay right where you are. That's what they're doing. So I would suggest we quit pointing the finger to Washington. Number one, as I said, they're not solving many things there. They're not out leading the country on any of the issues we are going to talk about here tonight. They're not leading. Who's leading? Well, the culture's leading. It's always about the culture. It always has been in every civilization. It's always the rise and fall of every civilization is always about the culture. It's never about the economy. The economy follows the culture. The economy's bad because, as Dale talked about, because why? Because the families are broken. And what the word for economy comes from the Greek word oikos, which means home. Every home is a little economy. And when the home breaks, the economy can't do well. Particularly the economy for the vast majority of Americans who are seeing fatherlessness and out-of-wedlock birth rates and divorce rates and abandonment. How do you expect average Americans to rise when their little business, their little economy is broken? No, the changes in America, I realized from the very beginning, come from here. Come from America. And so when I speak, when I say, well, you know, you get in trouble for leading, yes, not just leading legislatively, but actually going out into the culture and trying to make a difference. Going out and speaking into the culture. Speaking the truth about life, about marriage. And I did. I took up bills. I traveled the country. I tried to rally people. And I got a whipping from the media. In fact, my children, after a while, after reading the paper about me, thought my first name had been changed to Ultra. Because it's one thing to be, as you know, I'm sure John and Christy know this from the papers here in the state, if you're a liberal, well, then you're Senator such and such. If you're a conservative, you're the conservative Senator such and such. They name you. They brand you. Right? You never see the liberal senator. There's no such thing. But if you speak out on life issues and marriage issues, then you're the ultra-conservative. So we went out and worked on those issues and eventually caught up to me in the state of Pennsylvania. And in 2006, I left the United States Senate involuntarily. And I went off and I decided, okay, that was my time in the United States Senate. I'd done my thing. I'd served my country. And now I was going to go out and work on a whole bunch of issues. I worked on issues like radical Islam. I spent 4 years at a think tank. And during that time, I wrote and lectured all over the country because I saw that as a great existential threat, trying to alert the American public on this clash of civilizations, unlike what the president said the other day. It is, in fact, a clash of civilizations. And it's been happening for 1,300 years. We better wake up to that fact in America today, that it's back. And we better deal with it, and we have to have a discussion that when someone yells Allah Akbar and cuts someone's head off, it's not a workplace violence incident. But here I was, I'd done my thing. I'd worked in the House, worked in the Senate, gotten some things done, made some accomplishments. But I thought I was done with politics. But God had other plans. And it came in the oddest way. It came through a little girl. About a year after I left the Senate, Karen found out, I found out at the age of 50 that we were expecting another baby. So Abraham and Sarah got ready. We prepared for having another child. And that little baby came, and she was a miracle. But we were told something might be wrong. We weren't sure. They weren't really sure what was going on. And about 4 days later, we got this diagnosis that she had something called trisomy 18. And of course, by then we had sort of an inkling that this is what she might have, and so we looked up all the medical literature, and it all said the same thing. Incompatible with life. That your baby's going to live a few days, maybe a few months, but she will die. And that was the diagnosis. That's what they told us. She was in the NICU, and we took care of her, but she was doing fine. She wasn't dying. And they said, well, there's really nothing more we can do for her here, so we sent her home on hospice care. And have you ever taken a baby home on hospice? We did. I'll never forget meeting with the first hospice doctor who came in to see us, and he spent half an hour telling us how our daughter was going to die. All the details, what you can expect, how you should react. And we left and we looked at each other and said, he's never coming back. We're not going to sit here and wait for our daughter to die. We're going to enjoy every single day of her life and celebrate her life. And so we did. Every week, we had a birthday. And our goal was that Bella would have as many weeks' birthdays as our regular kids would have years' birthdays. And that would be a wonderful and blessed life for us. She went through some incredible times. Twice, her heart stopped. She stopped breathing, her heart stopped. And Karen, who, thank God, was a nurse, was able to revive her. She ended up with long stints in the hospital because she got a cold. That's what kills these little precious, fragile girls, boys with this disorder. And all the time we were through this weeks and months of fighting for Bella's life, we had to fight with doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals for care. You see, Bella will never talk. Bella will probably never walk. She'll never feed herself. She is disabled, mentally and physically. And we found out that the world doesn't quite value children like that as much as they do normal children. We had to battle for tests that were routine because they were expensive. Not expensive, but expensive for her. And so we went through this battle for 2 years, the first 2 years of her life. While that was going on, something was going on in Washington that began to get my attention, something called the Affordable Care Act. And when you get into the world of people with disabilities, you realize that what I was going through, every parent who has a disabled child goes through. Fighting for the dignity of care. And you also meet people not just from America, but from around the world. And then you begin to hear the real horror stories about how government-run medicine countries treat the disabled. Or should I say, don't treat the disabled. And so when I saw Obamacare coming up and having been through this experience, I said, I can't sit on the sideline. It may make no sense for me to get out there. No one may listen to me. But I have to speak for Bella and for all the little Bellas. And so I went out and started talking, giving speeches, got on a radio show. I hosted Friday Bill Bennett's radio show. He has a radio show on some stations around the country. So I just went out and started talking to get my voice out. And I would, of course, because I had relations with the press, I would always put press release out, I'm going here, going there. No one paid any attention. But I'd put them out anyway. And then one day I was asked to speak in Iowa. And I put a press release out. I'm going to Iowa. And I get a call from Washington Magazine that says, hey, I see you're going to Iowa. Are you going to run for president? I said, well, I was asked to give a speech there, and so I'm going to give a speech. Oh, so you're not running for president? I said, no, I didn't say I was or I wasn't. I just said I'm going to give a speech. Oh, so you are running for president. This is how reporters act. And I said, look, I didn't say one way or the other. I'm just going to give a speech. About 4 or 5 hours later at my mother-in-law's house, sitting in her living room, having a nice conversation. And next thing I hear is, ah! It was my mother-in-law. And she said, Rick, you're running for president. It's right there on the crawl on Hannity. And lo and behold, this reporter printed an article saying, Santorum going to Iowa considering run for president. So I show up to Iowa a few days later, C-SPAN cameras, national media, packed house of people, and I said, this is a good gig. And so a few weeks later, I announced I was going to New Hampshire. Boom! All the media's there. Now everybody wanted to hear what I had to say. So I thought, okay, let's see how long we can keep this thing going. And so I went out and started talking about Obamacare and, throwing a few other issues just to make it interesting. And, well, people kept showing up. And I thought, well, people would say, are you running for president? I said, no, I'm really walking. I'm just sort of trying to see, God has got me on this path for some unknown reason. And as the time went by, I started to talk to my wife and kids about it. And, I said to Karen, I said, maybe we got to start thinking about running for president. And she said, no. I said, no, I didn't say whether we decided. I said, we have to think about running for president. She said, no. I said, well, okay. This is always a good one, guys. You know this. Well, let's pray about it, right? It's always a good one. Safe, right? Let's pray about it. She said, no. And I said, what do you mean? Karen, I know you pray about these. I mean, we have to pray about it. We're a praying family. And she said, God could not possibly want you to do this. And I said, okay, fine. We'll put you down as undecided right now. We'll come back and visit later. And so, we kept going on these things. And I finally, come back to Karen. And she was the last person to sign on. But when she did, she said, look, I've always knew this was the right thing to do. I just don't want to do it. But it's clear to me this is what God's calling us to do. And as much as I don't want to, I have to do it. And so here we are, 2011. By the way, nobody in the country encouraged me to run for president. Nobody. And I say that all serious. Nobody. With one exception, and that was my 12-year-old daughter, Sarah Maria. She actually was all into it. She had binders for the states and all this kind of stuff and how I could win. And she was it. I remind you, I have 6 other children, but she was the only one who was on board. And so I did the logical thing. When you lose your Senate race in 2006 by the largest margin of any incumbent senator in 30 years, 4 years later announce you run for president of the United States. And that's what we did. And I went to Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire, the 3 first states. And I spent most of my time, probably the majority of my time in Iowa, but I spent a lot of time in the other states too. I did 385 town hall meetings in Iowa. Average attendance, 12 people. I know in South Dakota that's big. I get that, okay? I get that, okay? So it's probably a bad audience to use the 12 number on. Okay. But people would say, well, why are you still running? You're at the bottom of the polls. You're going nowhere. Everybody else has gone up and down, and no one's paying any attention to you. And the debates, there were like 18 debates in 2011, and you're over there, all the way off the, like at the kids' table. Off the stage. Nobody's asking any questions, and yet here you are. You keep doing it. I said, I'm just walking. It makes no sense. But that's what I just felt like I was called to do. It was a few days before the Iowa caucuses, and that last 10 days before the caucus, right after Christmas, caucus was right after New Year's, I went from 5%, and in 10 days' time, went from 5% to 21% the weekend before the caucuses. No one had ever seen anything like it. Never happened in the history of the Iowa caucuses. To just come out of nowhere. By the way, I spent a lot of money to get there. I ran television ads in Iowa. I spent $30,000 on television. You can run for city council in Hill City for less than that month, for more than that money. $30,000 is all I spent on TV. I went from 5% to 21%. How does that happen? It's the same way some guy who nobody knows gets elected to Congress, and the same way that you win and defeat incumbents, because God will be faithful if you are faithful. I went into a church in Sioux City. The pastor there, I spoke at his church. And afterwards, he walked up to me and he handed me a little jewelry box. You know, those hard boxes with the fuzz on them. I don't get many of those boxes. And I thought, well, looks like maybe the cufflinks. Get some cufflinks. And so I open up the box, I look at them. They sort of look like cufflinks. They were sort of round, but there was no back to them. They looked like, I don't know. I couldn't tell what they were. They didn't look metal. They looked maybe like stone. I couldn't really tell what they were. They had markings on them, but there were no discernible marks, like no images. And so what do you do when you open up a gift and the guy standing next to you and you have no idea what he's just given you? So you open up and you just stare at it and you hope he says something. But he didn't. And so eventually I just said, "Thank you." He said, "Do you know what it is?" I said, "Okay, no, I don't know what it is." He said, "You know, I saw you for months and months and months go to 99 counties, your 300 and some town hall meetings, going out there just giving it all and having no shot, no one paying any attention to it, everybody making fun of you." He said, "When I saw these on my bookshelf, they had been given to me by someone who came from Jerusalem." He said, "These are widow's mites." He said, "God is going to bless you because you gave everything." Now, I share that with you not to say, wow, how awesome am I? I share that with you is that look, I come from nothing. My dad's an immigrant to this country. Grandfather was a coal miner. I grew up in public housing for the first 18 years of my life. When I ran for Congress, I knew nobody, had no money, nothing. And if you're faithful, God will be faithful. People ask me all the time, they say, "Senator, things are really in bad shape." And I said, yeah. Our country's, I used to say in 2012, our country's changing. I don't say that anymore. I say the truth. Our country's changed. This is a different country. This is a different country. And ladies and gentlemen, let's own up. It happened on our watch. One of my favorite stories is a story they tell about G.K. Chesterton, who was a great social critic in London during the turn of the last century. He was sort of the Charles Krauthammer of the day. So he was always poking fun at the London establishment, the politically correct establishment. And so one of the London tabloids, to poke fun at Chesterton, asked him to write an article. And the article was entitled, they asked him to write the article entitled this. They gave him the title. "What's Wrong with the World?" Chesterton said, "Okay, I'll take that. I'll do that." The next day, the very next day, he submitted the manuscript to the tabloid, and they opened it up, and here's what it read. "What's wrong with the world? I am. Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton." I know you feel like you live here in South Dakota and things are pretty good here. Values are still strong. But you probably noticed some changes here too. You look around the country and you just scratch your head and say, well, what can I do? I'm only one person. I mean, I live in South Dakota. I mean, what can I do? You know, people ask me that all over the country, and I give them the same answer. My answer is something. Something. In every aspect of your life, our country is eroding away. Our families. How many of your children have the same values that you do? How many of your grandchildren do? What have you done about it? Look at our schools. How many of our schools teach the truth about America and American history? Do you know the most popular history textbook in America today, the one used in the most schools of any other history textbook, was written by a Marxist, an anti-American Marxist named Howard Zinn. Is that book in your schools? Do you know? They do. You see, the other side knows. The other side who's trying to change America, they know all about that. They're trying to influence your children. These things. They're coming after them. You know, the average kid in America today spends 8 to 10 hours a day in front of one of these things. How much time they spend in church? How much time do they spend talking to their parents? Who's raising our children? And our response is, oh, well, we have to protect our kids. Good luck. No. One of the reasons I got into the movie business is because I'm sick and tired of Hollywood shaping the moral imagination of our country. And so I decided I'm stopped going to complain about it. I'm going to do something about it. And so we're producing movies. We're going to produce a lot of movies. And we hope to have them very, very profitable so we can produce a lot more movies and other people will get in and produce movies. We should be able to, if you think about it, we produce Christian films. And you think of Christian films, what do you think of Christian films? You think poor quality, cheesy, right? Isn't it sad? Up until 100 years ago, most of the great music and art was created by or for the church. And then when technology came around, the church went into a shell. And they just cursed the darkness. Where's the church? Where's the church? Where are the people in the church who make up the church? You say, well, what can I do? Something. Everything from supporting those films to encouraging your family to get involved in entertainment and the arts. Yes, God forbid. Go into the devil's den. In education. Look at our schools. I'm not talking about primary and secondary. Look at our academic institutions in America. The way the left began to win. Go back. Traditional values. Solid in America. Started to change. When? Oh, about one generation after the left took over our universities. Then they started training the young people that there is no truth. Do you know that 62% of kids who go into colleges today with a faith conviction leave without one? And we give billions of dollars to these secular institutions to destroy our children's moral values. The government does, and you do. How many of you give contributions to your secular, liberal, politically correct institutions of higher learning because you like their football team or their hockey team? Let me just say 2 words to you. Stop it. They're destroying our country, and we have to take it back. So the answer is simply to do something in your home, in your schools, in your business. 2 weeks ago, I was at Hobby Lobby with the Green family. It cost them a lot of money to fight. But they fought, and they scored a great victory. But there's a lesson in this victory. It's a lesson that we have never learned. But the other side, oh, did they do it well? You know what the lesson is? Did anyone see the regulations that came out after the Hobby Lobby decision that the Obama administration put forward? Virtually no change. Did you hear what I said? They lost. And what did they say? We're going to do whatever we want to do anyway. When we lose, let's take the marriage issue. We haven't even lost, and we're giving up. We're saying, oh, well, we need to change because, well, you know, we're on the wrong side of history. Ladies and gentlemen, history is not my judge. God is my judge, and yours too. They win because they fight. They don't give up. Hobby Lobby, every Supreme Court case they lose, what do? They come back and sue again. I was talking earlier today, I found out in the city of Houston, They passed a bathroom bill, unisex bathrooms. You can go to any bathroom you want as you identify. And so what? The church rose up, thanks be to God, and fought it. You're going to get a referendum. So what did they do? Today, the city council issued subpoenas for every church. All the major churches who were behind this, they issued subpoenas asking them to turn over all of their sermons. Ronald Reagan said freedom is only one generation away from extinction. It's up to every generation to keep it alive. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not. That's why what you're doing here tonight is so important. Because this organization they're fighting. And they need leaders to join them vocally. How many of you go to your social group or club and because, well, it's just not polite to talk about these issues, you just keep your head down, or in your business that maybe, the corporate policy is not friendly to our values and you just keep your head down? That's how we lose, because they don't. How do you think it got changed in the first place? Because they want to win more than you do. I always go back and say, how did we win the American Revolution? One reason, in my opinion, aside from prayer and God's blessing, for sure, that was the big one. But when it came to what we did as patriots, there was one reason we won. And you read the last sentence of the Declaration, and it'll tell you. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We refuse to lose. So my challenge to you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, God called you here for a reason. You heard speaker after speaker talk about what they're doing and what you must do. This is not a fire drill. This is not a fire drill. This is not one of those things, fire alarm went off, I'll just keep working. This is a flashpoint in American history that will tell a story about whether we were different than every other civilization that went into decline. Whether we had the ability to do what none of them have been able to do, which is push back the tide and stand up for a country that I believe is unique in human history, and because of that, I think we have the ability to do this. We are the only country in the history of the world that was founded on this premise. Many have copied our Constitution. Nobody's copied our Declaration. Nobody's copied these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by with certain unalienable rights. That means non-transferable, but they can't take them away from you. They exist because you exist as a creation of a loving God. That's what makes us different. This country is only going to be brought back through the church and the people in the church who have the courage to, as the bishop said, be martyrs. You're not going to be popular. Let me assure you, I'm not popular. Anybody want to read my Facebook page or my Twitter feeds? My daughter, who at the time was 21 years old, we gave her the responsibility, because we didn't have any staff during my presidential campaign, we gave her the responsibility of managing my Facebook page. She lasted 3 hours. She called in tears. She said, "Daddy, you have no idea what they say about you. They hate you. They hate you. And I can't watch that because I love you. They will hate you. They will persecute you." He's persecuted. This organization will be. That's why they need you. Tonight you have the opportunity to do something. I pray for the future of South Dakota and this country that you do. Thank you and God bless.